Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time we're going to tackle cannabinoid tolerance and dependence.
Oh, yeah. This is a good one.
Yeah, someone really wanted us to dig into what's happening in the brain with chronic cannabinoid use.
Makes sense.
How tolerance develops and even dependence. So basically, we'll be exploring neuroadaptation. You know how our brains respond to long-term cannabinoid exposure?
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable, really. You could almost think of it like a dance between the brain
Oh, I like that.
and the cannabinoids,
Okay.
where the brain's trying to maintain this sort of equilibrium.
Okay, so let's break down this dance move by move. But first, maybe we need a quick refresher on how cannabinoids even interact with our bodies at the cellular level.
All right, so imagine cannabinoids are keys,
Okay.
and our body has these special locks
Okay.
called receptors.
Got it.
So when a cannabinoid, this key, finds the right receptor, the right lock, it starts this whole chain reaction inside the cell. And that leads to all those effects we associate with cannabinoids, relaxation, changes in perception, the whole thing.
Right. Makes sense. So it's all about these receptors. And I remember from some of our past deep dives that there are different types.
Oh,
right?
for sure, yeah.
Can you remind us about those again?
Absolutely. So the main ones, the VIPs in the cannabinoid world, are CB1 and CB2.
Okay, yeah, those sound familiar.
Yeah, CB1 receptors, they're mostly found in the brain,
Got it.
and they play a big role in those psychoactive effects.
Okay.
This is why THC, the main psychoactive part of cannabis, has such a big effect on mood, thoughts, all that. It really activates those CB1 receptors.
Oh, okay. So that's why some people feel euphoric or get the munchies.
Exactly.
Okay, what about CB2? Where are they?
Well, they're more common in the immune system.
Oh, interesting.
Think of them like the behind-the-scenes managers keeping those immune responses in check and inflammation down.
Got it. So CB1 in the brain for the high and CB2 in the immune system kind of keeping things running smoothly. Yeah, exactly. Now, I remember you talking about G protein-coupled receptors, GPCRs, right? Mm-hmm. Are those related to CB1 and CB2?
Yes. Both CB1 and CB2 are part of this big family of proteins called GPCRs.
Okay.
They're really complex signaling machines in our cells. Imagine a molecular relay race.
Okay. I like that. I'm intrigued.
Yeah. So each runner triggers the next to sprint forward.
All right. Walk me through this relay race. What happens when a cannabinoid binds to a receptor?
So picture this. You have a cannabinoid molecule.
Uh-huh.
It binds to a CB1 receptor.
Okay.
That binding causes this shape change in the receptor. It kind of twists and turns to fit the cannabinoid.
So the receptor changes shape.
Exactly. It's like a domino effect. This change then activates this protein attached to the receptor called a G protein.
Okay.
That's the next runner in the relay.
Okay. Receptor changes, activates the G protein. What happens next?
Well, the activated G protein then interacts with other molecules inside the cell and sets off this cascade of effects downstream. This involves a bunch of different signaling pathways like CAMP-PP, PKA, and MAPK.
Oh, okay. Can you explain one of those pathways just so I can picture what's happening in the cell?
Sure, let's take the CAMP-PM pathway. So when the G protein is activated, it stimulates this enzyme, adenyl cyclase, and that enzyme produces this molecule, cyclic AMP or CAMP.
Okay.
CAMP then acts as this messenger inside the cell.
Oh, interesting.
And it starts this chain of events that affect how neurons are active.
So it's like the G protein sends out CANMP to tell other parts of the cell what to do, and that affects how brain cells talk to each other.
Exactly. And this whole process from the cannabinoid binding to all these signals, that's what's behind the effects we feel from cannabis.
Wow, so much is happening. It's amazing how this tiny molecule sets off this whole chain reaction in the brain. What happens when the signaling pathway is constantly exposed to cannabinoids, every day? Does the brain just keep responding the same way?
That's where things get really interesting. Our brains are really adaptable. When they're constantly exposed to cannabinoids, they start to adjust to try and keep things balanced with this new input.
Okay.
This adaptation is what we call neuroadaptation, and it's super important for understanding how tolerance and dependence develop.
So the brain isn't just sitting there passively.
Yeah.
It's trying to regulate the effects of the cannabinoids.
Yeah.
That's where tolerance comes in, right? When someone needs more of a substance to feel the same effects.
Exactly. Tolerance is basically the brain turning down the volume on that cannabinoid signal. And it can do that in a couple of ways.
Okay, I'm listening. How does it turn down the volume?
Well, one way is by reducing how many CB1 receptors are available. Remember, those are like the keyholes for cannabinoids.
Huh?
Fewer keyholes harder for the cannabinoids to unlock those effects.
So the brain gets rid of some of those receptors.
It can. That's called downregulation. But it can also make the remaining receptors less sensitive to cannabinoids, so they're less responsive to those keys.
Oh, wow. So it's kind of like a two-pronged approach, fewer receptors, and the ones that are left are less sensitive. It's like the brain is getting less impressed by the cannabinoids.
That's a great way to put it. And it's not just the receptors either. The brain can also change those downstream signaling pathways we talked about, making them less efficient. It's like the runners in the relay race getting tired and slowing down.
Wow. So fewer receptors, less sensitive receptors, and a slower relay race. The brain really is working hard to adapt to this constant influx of cannabinoids. It's pretty impressive.
It really is. And it shows how our brains and the things we put into our bodies really affect each other.
This makes me think about dependence. Is that just extreme tolerance, or is there something else going on?
That's a great question. And it's where things get even more complex. Tolerance is about needing more to get the same effect, but dependence is different. It's about having negative effects when you stop using. Like your body relies on the cannabinoids to work normally.
So it's like the brain gets so used to them that it forgets how to function without them.
Kind of, yeah. Like the brain has included cannabinoids in its operating system, and when you suddenly remove them, the system crashes.
And that crash shows up as withdrawal symptoms.
Exactly. Someone dependent on cannabinoids might get irritable, anxious, have trouble sleeping, or have intense cravings when they try to stop. Those are all classic signs of dependence.
Wow. So we've gone from basic cannabinoid signaling to the complexities of tolerance and dependence. This is really a deep dive. But I want to know more about those research findings you mentioned earlier. How do they fit into all of this?
So one really fascinating area of research is this concept called functional selectivity. It's been a game changer in understanding how receptors work, especially with cannabinoids.
Okay, functional selectivity. Why is it so important?
Basically, it means that a single receptor, like our CB1, can be activated in different ways, and that leads to different downstream effects.
Oh, so it's not just an on-off switch.
Right, it's more like a dimmer switch with different settings.
So different cannabinoids can unlock that CB1 receptor in different ways, leading to different responses in the cell.
Exactly. It opens up all sorts of possibilities for designing therapies that target specific pathways, maximize the good stuff, minimize the bad.
Oh, I like that.
It's like having a key that not only opens the door, but also turns on the lights or changes the thermostat. Just depends on how you turn it.
That's a great analogy. It makes me think about personalized medicine, tailoring treatments for each person. Okay, but what about that research you mentioned with cannabinoids and pancreatic tumor cells?
Right, so that's another exciting area. It's about apoptosis, which is basically programmed cell death, like a natural process to get rid of damaged cells.
Oh, okay.
This research looked at how certain cannabinoids, when you put them with those tumor cells, they triggered this apoptosis. So it led to the death of those cancer cells.
So like some cannabinoids could act like assassins that target and eliminate those cancer cells.
Yeah, kind of like that. And it's still early, but the research suggests cannabinoids might have a role in fighting cancer.
It's mind-blowing to think about how many potential therapeutic applications there are beyond just the high. Now, there was that other study you mentioned with LPA and GPR55 in breast cancer cells.
Yeah, so LPA is lysophosphatidic acid.
Okay.
And it's the signaling molecule involved in cell growth and stuff.
Gotcha.
GPR55 is another receptor, but it's not like CB1 or CB2. It's a non-classical cannabinoid receptor.
So like a different lock for a slightly different key.
Exactly. And the study found that both LPA and GPR55 affect how breast cancer cells move and spread. So maybe they could be targets for therapies to slow down metastasis.
So using cannabinoids or things that work on those receptors to stop cancer from spreading.
It's definitely worth exploring more. And it really shows how complex the endocannabinoid system is, It's much more than we thought.
You mentioned the body's own cannabinoids. What are those called again?
Endocannabinoids.
Right.
They're like our internal versions of the ones in cannabis.
Uh-huh.
And they're super important for regulating so many things. Mood, appetite, pain, inflammation. It's like our own internal cannabis system that helps keep everything balanced.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. We've gone from receptors and pathways to tolerance and dependence to the body's own cannabis system, and now we're talking about fighting cancer and managing pain.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing how much we've learned about cannabinoids.
It really is. It shows you what science can do. And what's even more exciting is that we're just getting started. There's so much more to discover about cannabinoids.
It really makes you realize how much we still don't know. But you know me, I always have more questions. We talked about those signaling pathways, right? Can we go a bit deeper into that?
Definitely. Remember that alphabet soup of pathways?
Oh, yeah.
Each one is like a complex city. We're still figuring out all the routes and the traffic patterns. But let's focus on one, the MAPK pathway.
All right. MAPK pathway. Why is it so important?
So the MAPK pathway, it stands for mitogen-activated protein kinase pathway. It's really important in how cells grow and even die.
It sounds important.
It is. It's like the city planner,
Yeah.
deciding what goes where and how the whole city works.
Okay, so how do cannabinoids fit in?
Well, the research suggests that they can activate certain enzymes in the MAPK pathway, and that affects things like gene expression and protein synthesis.
Oh, wow.
Like they're sending messages to the city planner, telling it how the city should develop.
So they have a big impact on how cells work, beyond just the effects we feel.
Exactly. And the MAPK pathway isn't the only one. Cannabinoids can interact with other pathways, too. It creates this whole web of responses in the cells.
Like an orchestra.
I like that.
All these different instruments playing together to create this amazing sound.
Beautiful analogy. And the more we learn about each part, the more we can appreciate the whole thing.
Speaking of appreciating complexity, I remember you mentioning that chronic use can actually change the structure of brain cells. You said synaptic plasticity.
Right, synaptic plasticity. It's the brain's ability to change how strong the connections between neurons are.
Like the brain rewiring itself.
Exactly. It's the basis of learning and memory. Like the brain is constantly adapting, making new connections, strengthening old ones.
So how do cannabinoids affect that?
Studies have shown that chronic exposure can change synaptic plasticity. So it could affect learning and memory.
Oh, so like someone messing with the wiring in the brain.
Kind of, yeah.
Wait, does that mean chronic cannabis use can hurt your memory?
That's what researchers are trying to figure out.
Okay.
Some studies say that chronic use, especially when you start young, can have a bad effect on how you think. But it's not clear-cut. There are so many factors.
It's a no easy answer.
Nope. Your genes, how old you were when you started, how much you use, what kind you use, it all matters. It's just a good reminder that while cannabis can be good, you shouldn't take it lightly.
I hear that. Okay, let's switch gears back to cannabinoids and cancer. You said certain cannabinoids can make pancreatic tumor cells die, right? Could that be a treatment?
It's definitely something people are looking into.
Okay.
There's more and more evidence that some cannabinoids, especially CBD, can fight cancer.
Yeah.
They can stop tumors from growing, kill cancer cells, even reduce how much the cancer spreads. It's like they mess up the cancer cell's communication system so they can't multiply and spread.
Wow. Are we talking about cannabinoids being part of cancer treatment in the future?
Well, it could happen, but it's still early. We need more research to figure out the right doses, how to give it to people, and what side effects there might be.
It's important to be cautious, but it's really exciting.
Yeah, and it shows how much potential cannabinoids have. Okay, remember we talked about how they can help with pain and inflammation?
Yeah, like why some people use cannabis for chronic pain.
Right. So cannabinoids, especially CBD, have shown promise in managing that and reducing inflammation. They work with the endocannabinoid system, which is really important in how we feel pain and how our immune system works.
So they're working with the body's natural pain management system.
You got it.
That's really interesting. And this is a big area of research in medical cannabis, right? Like they're doing clinical trials on it.
Exactly. And it's not just pain. They're studying cannabinoids for so many things like anxiety, depression, epilepsy, MS. It seems like the possibilities are endless.
This has been quite the deep dive.
It has.
I feel like I understand so much more about how cannabinoids work, how tolerance and dependence happen, and all the potential they have for treating different conditions. It's clear there's still a lot to learn, but the journey of discovery is so cool.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so exciting. There's always something new to learn, to explore, to question.
This deep dive has been a roller coaster, but I feel like I have a much better grasp of cannabinoids now and how they affect us. It's really clear that we're only just scratching the surface.
You're right. It's a reminder that cannabis can be good, but you've got to be smart about it.
Makes sense. So what happens when someone who's been using cannabis a lot stops? Does their brain go back to how it was before?
That's a tough question. Researchers are looking into it. You know, the brain is amazing at adapting, but we don't know for sure if it can completely recover.
Oh, okay.
Some studies say some mental functions can get better when you stop, but others say some changes may stick around, especially in the structure of the brain. It's like this battle between the brain's ability to bounce back and the potential for lasting effects.
Wow. So is there an answer?
Not really. It's complicated. And again, it shows that you shouldn't take cannabis lightly. You have to make informed choices.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I think we've done a pretty good job exploring cannabinoid tolerance and dependence.
I think so too.
And hopefully our listeners have a better understanding of how complex it all is.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah. And that's what makes it so rewarding to study.
Yeah.
I'm excited for our next deep dive. But I have one last question. We talked about how the brain adapts to chronic use, right? Leading to tolerance and dependence. But what happens when someone stops using after a long time? Does their brain go back to normal?
Yeah, it just highlights how much we're still learning, about our bodies and how these tiny things like cannabinoids can have such a big impact. It really makes you realize how much we don't know and all the potential out there for new discoveries.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The research is going strong, new stuff coming out all the time.
It's an exciting time to be in this field.
Absolutely.
And it's not just about understanding the science for the sake of it, right? This has real implications. Public health, personal decisions, developing new therapies for all sorts of conditions.
Exactly, especially with cannabis becoming more common. It's important to understand those risks and benefits, like tolerance, dependence, the long-term effects. It can help people make better choices, for their own health and well-being. Right. Give people the info they need to make good decisions. And for the research, so much potential. Targeted therapies for dependence and even exploring those benefits for things like pain, cancer, neurological disorders.
Oh, yeah, tons of possibilities. Really shows the power of science, constantly trying to understand the body.
Well, I think we've really gotten deep into this topic. The cannabinoid signaling, tolerance and dependence, the body's own system, and even those therapeutic possibilities.
I think so, too. Quite the journey.
Hopefully our listeners have a better grasp of all this complexity now.
For sure.
There's still so much to uncover, but that's what makes it so exciting.
Absolutely. The journey is the reward.
That's what this show is all about, right? Exploring these complex topics, making connections, sparking curiosity.
Exactly.
We hope this gave everyone a good foundation for understanding cannabinoids and inspires them to keep learning more.
Knowledge is power, but understanding is key. So keep asking those questions, keep learning, and keep those brains active.
That's our motto here at The Deep Dive.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So that's all for today. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey into the world of cannabinoids. We'll see you next time for another Deep Dive. Until then, stay curious.